Hello and welcome to Tactical Rock 40k. My name's Toby Bennett, the current top UKTC Dark Angel player and a top 100 player in the world. Now today I am going to be talking to you about why you should play Dark Angels. Now, if you're anything like me, you probably loved the idea of that noble defensive line of Terminator armored giants striding forward with that kind of Arthurian legend around them, and just absolutely destroying the enemies of man in front of them. You might have been a little bit more attracted to the element of the bikes and the land speeders pushing forward, heroically careening at speed. I know that there's one of the famous books, The Purging of Cadalus, where one of the Ravenwing sergeants drives himself directly into an orc battle wagon, which was rather spectacular, at least I thought. And all of these different things might lead you to go, well, why don't I recreate that on the battlefield? Another really great example of recent times comes from the same storyline, and that is the Lion's return. So obviously we know that he has now woken up. He is back in the 40k universe. He's already tussled with one of his brothers. In very recent lore, he is now setting up his first meeting with Rabute Guilliman, his only remaining brother. So we're finding out what's going to happen there. So that's going to be super exciting. And who doesn't love having a literal demigod that looks like Charles Dance wandering around, stabbing people with a massive sword and scamming them with the Emperor's shield? Alongside that, there has been the Return of the Fallen, which has been a long-term Dark Angel story. Obviously, half of the chapter fell during the Horus Heresy. But now there is a lot more lore around how a lot of those Dark Angels that were considered fallen didn't realize. They thought the Lion had betrayed them instead and that they were still the loyalists. So it's a really interesting dynamic that now suddenly they're coming out of the woodwork. We're seeing people like Zabriel from Son of the Forest. And personally, I find their stories incredibly compelling. And alongside that, we're getting absolutely beautiful models for them. And I love recreating that on the battlefield. Personally, I really want to build a Zabriel conversion, but equally I'm kind of holding out hope that Games Workshop might do a Black Library exclusive of Zabriel or some of the other of the Lion's companions all together. But without further ado, let's jump in and let's talk more about the Lion, because he is the Primarch of the Legion. I think if you're here, you're probably wanting to know about the tactics more so than the lore of the Lion. But equally, if you are passionate about Dark Angels, it's probably because of the lore in the first place. Now, the Primarch, finally, after a long time of tweaking, is actually up to snuff. He finally delivers what is written on those pages. You know, you can very literally imagine him doing the kind of destruction that he does in some of the Son of the Forest moments, or going toe to toe with Angron. I don't think he can actually do that in game, but equally he can give it a damn good go. I don't think they kill each other on the first swing, either of them. So it's a pretty damn good fight. And it's nice to see that he finally matches that lore, and he has that ability to really threaten your opponent and really make sure that they have something to fear on the other side of the battlefield. He does fill that absolutely terrifying damage dealer role, you know, when he's bringing in either his strike with that 8 attacks at damage 4, it can cut through tanks like they're absolutely nothing. Alternatively, he can go into infantry blobs, and with 16 attacks with sustained hits, hitting on 2s, usually re-rolling 1s, and then for the most part, with AP3 going straight up to a 6-up armor save for anything that's power armored, he chops through units like nobody's business. You know, no 2-wound infantry can really stomach that coming at them very quickly. And because he fights first, even if they charge him, he is bullying them. So the Lion really can deal a huge amount of damage. But alongside that, as I've already mentioned, he does have those rerolls. And that's a 6-inch aura. And if you can leverage that with some of our more elite units, like your Deathwing Knights or your Inner Circle companions, into other character units, he can really support that offensive push because he gives you Oath's redundancy, which essentially means that you can put your Oath of Moment on a slightly different target, and those key combats that the Lion's involved with, he doesn't need to use Oath of Moment, so you've got more rerolls around the board, allowing you to push a little bit harder with a little bit more consistent damage output, which is really key when we're looking at things like Land Speed of Vengeances, which have quite a lot of potential to sort of either high roll or low roll on their output because they are a d6 plus 1 shots with blast. They're great when they pop off, and then they're rolling either on or slightly above average, excellent. But if they do dip, you want them to be able to use that 3 damage consistently to make sure that say, if they're going into elite infantry, they're killing 3 of them if they have rolled a 1 on their number of shots, 1 plus blast. If they're getting 3 kills still, even at their worst, that's very useful still. And that's what Oath can really do. So having the Lion able to go, okay, these Deathwing Knights do not need Oath, even though they're going into a tough target, super, super efficient. Alongside that, with an elite army like Dark Angels, where you have quite a low model count, ironically, we are definitely a lower model count than things like Custodes right now. He really does help the defensive stats of the army with his 4-up Feel No Pain to mortal wounds in a 6-inch aura. Obviously, we do have access to those Watchers in the Dark, extremely useful little ability, but having the Lion able just to go, right, 6-inch aura, protecting you from grenades, tank shock, all that kind of thing, it just adds that little extra layer of protection that people might try and exploit, We're seeing more effects out of, obviously with dev wounds counting as mortal wounds, obviously they don't spill over, but with that counting, it really can be very useful because that's an efficient way to deal with Deathwing Knights because it gets around their 4-up invuln. If you're playing in a Circle Companions with a Librarian or Azrael, again, saving them from that issue. And it just makes, it adds another layer of protection and security to your army. And I think having that Feel No Pain just puts another doubt in your opponent's mind, because if you just roll 4-ups, suddenly their damage outputs just takes a nosedive off a cliff and you're right in front of them, ready to push. And that is one of the beauties of Dark Angels. They are a very, very difficult army to plan your damage output into because of the amount of defensive stats that they can call upon, be that the Lion's 3-up invuln, Deathwing Knights -1 damage, or the Inner Circle Companions -1 to hit plus other buffs. Can be extremely useful. Finally, I've already mentioned like the kind of screwing over your opponent's plans with how they can kind of plan that damage output, etc. Nothing is better than scamming your opponent on 3-up invulnerable saves. Sometimes the Lion feels impossible to kill, and I love that. Equally, you will also get those games where he goes down to a stiff breeze, which is quite sad, especially when you look at it, you go, there's 315 points down the Swanee. But equally, other games you will just go, you are not killing this guy. He'll take like 9 damage and then sit there on 1 damage for the rest of the game. And honestly, when that happens, it's absolutely beautiful. Couple that with the -1 to wound if strength is higher. Really nice little ability. Would love it if they changed that to -1 to wound flat. I think that would just help against things like melters, which really do have a nice profile into the Lion. And I think just pushing them onto 5s would just be enough to sort of tip him over the edge in terms of those defensive stats. But equally, I am Dark Angel's biased. That might make him a little bit too good. But also, you can re-roll his invulnerable saves. And most 2-up invulnerable saves, you cannot re-roll, or they're only for a turn. See Makari or the Canoness for Adeptus Sororitas. But the Lion, you can re-roll that 3-up invulnerable save. And that is extremely powerful for just going, well, I'm going to sit the Lion here. He's going to take your entire army, and then I am going to pile in with all of these other units, be they Deathwing Knights, Inner Circle Companions, Land Speed of Vengeances. Suddenly, you are getting to them. So that is probably why you want to play Dark Angels, because also that model looks sick. And I know that there are a lot of very talented artists out there. and they do some beautiful things to the lion, and I love seeing that work. So if you're an artist, head over to the Discord and drop a photo of your lion. We always want to see them. I love enjoying the art that people do because it all creates a story. Alongside creating that story, I love hearing your battle stories of the lion, how heroically he was as he strode across the battlefield or arrived from deep strike all of a sudden. I love being able to just pick him up and rapid ingress him turn one. It's a beautiful little ability, and really catches people out a lot of the time, even though you warn them several times. If I go first, I can do this, but equally, how on earth do they plan for a rapid ingressing Primarch? So that might be a very good reason as to why you want to play Dark Angels. And there is a damn good reason to play the Lion at the moment as well. So don't worry if you did go, well, I really want to play this very cool model that I spent ages painting. He will still go and achieve some very impressive stories. So next, the Ravenwing. Now, I know a lot of people love their speed. They love bikes, land speeders. Now, obviously, we've seen some updates with land speeders. The Ravenwing have been a little bit left behind, in all honesty, and hopefully we will see a range refresh. And in all honesty, that might be a good reason to play Dark Angels. Just don't pick up some of the older models at the moment, because they are probably most likely to get a range refresh in the near future. I would expect sort of early 11th, we maybe see new Ravenwing Black Knights, possibly land speeders becoming storm speeders, but I think the most likely is that new Ravenwing Black Knight kit. Probably early 11th, maybe a tie-in with Dawn of War, depending. But I do kind of love that idea of the charge of the Light Brigade, but make it superhuman and super durable. When I was first really becoming competitive with my Dark Angels, it was with Stormlance Dark Angels. And it was with the 9 bike squads, the Ravenwing Command Squad, and then 6 Outriders. And that squad was just incredible. The speed that it brought, the ability to just zoom around the flank and really start pressuring your opponent before they were ready, or the durability, the frustration of having one of these giant-based bikes reanimating in your command phase. The 3 OC apiece, being able to like scam your opponent by getting a 5-up instead by taking on the Ancient, for an example. And then the Champion just being an absolute beat stick too. It was always an epic moment going, by the way, the threat range for this on turn 1 is this long. And I think most of those games I would literally get out the number of inches and go, hey, I just need you to understand that, like, see physically how fast these guys are so that you are prepared for if I do auto advance that 9 inches, and then really get up into your guts. Now, the other thing that I like with the Ravenwing is the synergy that they bring the army, and this is something I'm going to cover later on. But their role in the lore is that they go out there, they scout out your opponents, they take out those forward operating base, they skirmish with opponents' troops. Occasionally, they just fly their bike into an orc battle wagon and blow it up, which I think is rather spectacular. Again, Pershing of Catalyst, give it a read, well worth it. But also, they do provide that on the battlefield, on the tabletop as well. Going back to that example with the Ravenwing Command Squad and 6 Outriders, they would always be such a thorn for my opponent, especially when there's suddenly -1 to hit, -1 to wound because of the stratagem. They would buy time for my slower Deathwing Knights elements, or other foot-slogging infantry to get into position so that then suddenly you could absolutely clatter your opponent. Made all the more fun, oftentimes by Samael being absolutely disgustingly brutal, especially with Outriders when he goes up to damage 3. Sustain 2 and damage 3 is a scary, scary prospect for your opponent. So definitely bear that in mind, because it will just chop through things like there's no tomorrow. I also like, in terms of that extra competitive edge, this is probably something that you don't need to think about just yet, but those mounted units, they get around a lot of these like anti-infantry abilities. So I think the best example I've ever had was Lilith Hesperax, and 10 Witches are they are the true problem out of Drakari, or at least they were during Index. Index Drukhari, they were the real threat to Dark Angels. It was so difficult for us to kind of prep for that because the anti-infantry 2 from Lilith could just cut through Deathwing Knights far too quickly. It was really problematic. So in the final game of one of the international teams tournaments, I got 3 Outriders to screen the middle objective, and then I started burning it in Scorched Earth. Lilith came in with her 10 Witches because there was no way I was able to charge her. Came in with her 10 Witches, hit the Outriders, and then because she's anti-infantry 2 up but only strength 4, and again those Witches are only strength 4, they killed 3. 2. They killed 2 because it was a 3-man unit. They killed 2 of the bikes and left 1 of them alive, which then stopped my opponent denying my burn, kept Lilith out in the open, allowed me to fall back and then just unload all my guns into her and finish off that key unit that without having to sacrifice any of my Deathwing Knights or anything like that. It was just that 80-point bike unit. And it was at that moment that I knew that I had that game sewn up. So that different dynamic that they can add just by being a very different stat line, I think particularly you see it, a very different example, but when Victrix Honor Guard had 4 wounds, you saw how different it was and how difficult they were to kill. Outriders are similar to that in that they have that 4th wound, and that 4th wound breakpoint can be so impactful. And I really don't think it can be undersold just how useful that ability can be. So especially for now when they're 80 points, they're a great little skirmishing unit. And I do really like including them where I can. Next, the Deathwing. So this was why I decided Dark Angels. I love the Deathwing. I love the image of like 50 Terminators striding forth across the battlefield. I remember my first like Dark Angel army, just playing in your local game store. It was back during 9th, and it was 40 Terminators with the old Inner Circle ability, which was incredibly toxic, and the game is so much better that no longer exists within the game. But it was extremely fun at the time, just rolling up there with all of these Terminator models. And because honestly, most of us didn't have a clue what we were doing, especially me. It was just a grind into each other, and those Deathwing Terminators would have a great time. I love that image of these, ancient armored heroes storming out and just keep on pushing through punishing fields of fire. Anything that your opponent's throwing at you, they just keep coming. I love that with Deathwing Knights, and I love being able to do that. I think some of my favorite games is where I just have that wall of Deathwing Knights and they just clatter into your opponent and just end their day. It is absolutely cinematic. It's beautiful. It's fun. I just really, really enjoy it. Seeing them just do their thing, absolutely great. There is nothing better. It kind of gives you that flashback to like 300 when they first encounter the Persians and they're just striding forward, taking them out left, right, and center. It's just awesome. And I love that transfers to the tabletop. That 2-up, 4-up is no joke. -1 damage is a really strong ability. We're seeing a lot of people start spamming it in this current meta, which is a little bit of a pain in the bum because it was our thing. And when people are spamming it with like Catan or Redemptor Dreadnoughts, then that means that others are prepared for it, which is, as I say, a bit of a pain in the backside. But equally, Deathwing Knights have damn good rules. They're able to flex between killing infantry and killing vehicles because they've got anti-vehicle, anti-monster maces, which is a very, very useful ability. Being able to kind of not have to rely on some of the slightly more questionable anti-tank at range that we currently produce, things like Gladiator Lancers. Unfortunately, they are quite inconsistent, or Ballistus Dreadnoughts that are now at 150 points. It's difficult to justify them for their damage output. So overall, I love the fact that they're able to flex between those different roles, and there is nothing that fills an opponent more with fear, I've found, than seeing you rock up with 15 Deathwing Knights. And I've always loved that 15 has been the right number in this current meta. Possibly not, which is a hot take. So enjoy that and take that as you will. I'm going to discuss that in more videos later as to why that might not be the right number. But equally, they are still in my army as much as possible because they are just phenomenal models and phenomenal stat lines as well for those for what they can do. Yes, they are expensive at 50 points a model, but they damn well earn their points back with what they achieve over the course of a tournament. Finally, the Risen. So I've already mentioned how much I love that story of renegades returning to the ranks of the Imperium. I just think that it's a beautiful story, and the way that Mike Brooks kind of brought that to life was in Son of the Forest was truly exceptional. And if you haven't read that book and you're a Dark Angels fan, jump on it. The audiobook was also incredible. It is something that is essential reading or listening if you are a fan of the Dark Angels. And I love the way that they change the kind of the 30k lion compared to the 40k lion. That character arc is fantastic. And I love the way that we've always been this faction with this deep dark secret that we hunt down, and you have to force them to repent. But actually, it turns out that we were wrong. Not always wrong. There are still bad fallen out there. Luther was still falling to chaos, and there are bad guys that are Dark Angels still in chaos ranks. But equally, there's now more to it, and I love those layers. That's something really special. And I think what we've really benefited from is the fact that Games Workshop have decided to do that now in the last few years, because now, my goodness me, the models are stunning. Inner Circle Companions are one of the most beautiful models that we have in our range. I absolutely adore them. That kind of smoke-filled bladesman, they look incredible. And that black armor from the Legion, love it. I think it just suits them down to a T. And it's nice to see that transfer to the battlefield as well, because there's nothing better in Son of the Forest than seeing all of the Risen fighting. And I think there's no spoilers, but there's some phenomenal battles versus both non-Space Marine and Space Marine opponents for the Risen. And it's rather epic whenever they get into it. And then obviously you get towards the end of the Arcs of Omen, where the Inner Circle Companions burst out to support Azrael and Dante with the Lion against Angron and some of his other World Eaters. That was truly incredible. And I've got a real soft spot for Zabriel. I would love to create that model, but unfortunately I'm just really hoping that Games Workshop bring one out. That would be really awesome. But seeing Inner Circle Companions on the battlefield and seeing them just chop through your opponent like they are absolutely nothing has been incredible. I know that playing them with a Judicia in Wrath of the Rock has been a particularly enjoyable experience. They really do hack through things, and when they're just sitting there and go, well, Leon and Aggression, if you go on this point, I'm going to chop your head off. It's really quite tasty. I still really love them with Librarians to give them that 4-up invulnerable save, again, because the way that I like to play it, I screw with my opponent's maths, and I think that really helps. Suddenly -1 to hit, 4-up invulnerable save. Trying to think if they've got any other nice defensive stats. They don't really, but those two are pretty good in themselves. They've still got 3 wounds, which is no bad thing either. And they're reasonably cheap at 30 points a model as well. And as long as you get them into the right targets and give them the right support, they will definitely go through those units like there's no tomorrow. So that is why I love playing Dark Angels, because the lore transfers to the battlefield, and the stories that you create on the battlefield with your Dark Angels feel very much like they could be in a book. And for anyone that is on their first few steps into their competitive journey, because they've read the lore and they've loved the Dark Angels in there, embrace it. get those Dark Angels onto the battlefield and go for that heroic stand, go for that push. And hopefully you'll stay around here and watch more Tactical Rock 40k, where I will give you the best advice I can on how to become more efficient with your Dark Angels in a competitive setting. That's all for now. Remember, stay loyal, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks, guys. Bye.